Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Views from the Mitten podcast. I hope everybody's having a really good Tuesday. And as always, we're going to be talking about the NBA Finals. But before I get into that, I kind of want to go over a few things before we get into this. Started a YouTube channel. Not sure where that link will pop up, probably on my Anchor profile, or you can go to any of my Twitter profiles at BTP_99 or at VFTM pod on Twitter and find all the past episodes that were uploaded, including this one eventually, probably tomorrow. And then also, we're going to talk about the Olympics, where I don't know whether or not I can say it's overreacting. It's going to be a lot of overreacting that I've been seeing over the past few days. But we're going to start with the Olympics, which is, involving Team USA, Australia, all that stuff. So Team USA has been struggling in the exhibition games, more or less, to call it what it is. And the first game they lost to Nigeria, which was a game that a lot of people thought, we're going to clap this team. Realistically, you have Kevin Durant, you still have, Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal. They're only missing 3 players. They're missing Chris Middleton, Devin Booker, and Drew Holiday. They're missing 3 people. So realistically, you would think, okay, they're beating Nigeria. Nigeria still has NBA players, though, of course. They have 3 Miami Heat players, I believe, and a former G League player. Yeah, KZ Okpala, Precious Achiuwa, Gabe Vincent. There was somebody else, Josh Okogie. I don't know if I said that name already, but Josh Okogie played for the Timberwolves. So the defense on display in that game by Nigeria was very, very solid. Precious was blocking Kevin Durant. He was out there on Bradley Beal. He wasn't really scoring, but he was moving his feet on defense. And the slander that came after Nigeria beat the Team USA team, I don't know if it was because Team USA just lost, or if people genuinely actually all of a sudden care about the Olympics, because I still don't. I really never seen I mean, of course, it's probably from a trolling perspective. Hopefully it is, because if people really are slandering Nigeria for other reasons that I don't understand, if it's some other stuff that I just don't know about, I mean, that's up to them, it's up to other people. But overall, it's an exhibition game for one, and then 2, it's they just got outplayed. Kevin Durant played bad in game 1. Everybody can see that. A couple people played bad in game 1 of the exhibitions. But then they ran against Australia in their next exhibition game at the time of I think it's at the time where their schedule is. I don't know what the next game is, but Australia teams have always been consistent. Everybody knows this by now. As long as Patty Mills is on the team in some capacity, the Australian team is gonna be fine. And the Australian teams defensively got 10 times better, or I should say 10 times better, with Matisse Thybulle being on the court, because he's everywhere. Literally, he is everywhere. You got Dellavedova still on the team. You got Joe Ingles, a savvy vet for the team. The Australian teams aren't. I don't know why people shouldn't be getting surprised anymore if the Australian teams beat the USA team. Literally, it doesn't matter how good the USA teams are. I think Patty Mills beat. I forgot what team it was that they built, and I think Patty dropped 30 or something like that. Patty was going crazy one year. I can't really recall off the top of my head, but Patty goes crazy. So this whole shock value thing that people have when it comes to Team USA losing games, I understand we have Kevin Durant, we have Bradley Beal, but realistically, there's no defense on this team. We don't have a center on this team. If we're in situations where, Precious looks big compared to KD, KD's 6'7" foot, whatever they want to say, 6'11", something like that. Literally, Precious was able to go up with him. Even Matisse blocked, I think, Kevin Durant's leaner in the Australian game. So literally, I don't know if it's I won't say a mental thing for Kevin Durant, because obviously it's Kevin Durant we're talking about here. It's not like a mental block, but more or less it just goes to show that bench players in the NBA, or just players that don't play that much, that were rookies 2 years ago or a year ago, if you let these guys play, you'd be surprised who can actually guard the best players in the league, quote unquote, or the best players in the league at this moment in time. But the Olympics, really, I could care less. I mean, it's the exhibition stages. Of course, when they go to Tokyo, it doesn't fare well for them that they've lost to teams that on paper don't match up, but because they've played together longer, or it's not just a thrown together team of all the NBA's greatest talents, you get better results. Australia was probably constructed way better. Nigeria was probably constructed way better. Even the Argentina team that has Luis Scola on it seems like they're constructed a little bit better than, even though they lost to Australia too, but I feel like they're constructed a little bit better than the Team USA team. And it's weird how that works. Even I think Actually, I think USA might have played Argentina recently. I'm not sure, but I need to actually look at the schedule for what their exhibition games are. I only thing I remember is that they play Iran for like a couple other exhibition games. That's the only thing I really remember off the top of my head. Um, but yeah, just wanted to get that out of the way because it was just funny in a way to see like how like Josh Okogie and like the Nigerian basketball team have to tweet out and talk to guys like Stephen A about respecting a team and just acknowledging the fact that like, hey, they lost the game, it doesn't count. This is a test. This is a friendly game, and you're mad that you lost to Gabe Vincent. Like honestly, these are all NBA players. Like keep it a buck. Gabe Vincent was lighting them up. I ain't gonna lie. Gabe Vincent had like 19, I think, 19 or 20 in that game. But like these guys are still NBA players at the end of the day. Like they have to still do the same similar training to Kevin Durant and to Damian Lillard. And if Gabe Vincent has a better shooting night than Damian Lillard, that's just what it is. If Josh Okogie is getting more dunks at the rim than Zach LaVine that night, that's just what it is. Like now, I don't think Team USA goes lower than a bronze medal this year, realistically. If they get better. If they keep going on this track, I mean, shoot, they might get a bronze. Lowest is silver, but I wouldn't be surprised if like a team like Australia actually does win it out or gets like the highest placement. Because I don't know, the Australian teams are just really, really good. Like they're always constructed really well. It's always the same. It's always the same people or similar people that are always on the team. So they don't really have like they didn't really have a chance to have like chemistry issues. Like I just like how most of these teams are constructed, more or less. Like that's basically what I'm saying. But all right. So next thing we're gonna talk about is of course the NBA Finals, which it's been a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of things. And one thing I'm gonna talk about off rip is the overreaction to Game 3 with the Suns losing by 20 points. Now I'm gonna talk about Game 3 as a whole, but just like this specifically. People have been saying this for the past couple of weeks, like these 3 things in total. The Suns are here because of Chris Paul, more or less. I've seen that somewhere, or like Chris Paul kind of like Chris Paul is getting like favoritism because he's been playing for 16 years and this is like the closest he's getting, or this is like his first time in the finals. I understand that, but Booker is like a second coming to Kobe. I've seen that during like the Clippers series, either the Clippers or the Nuggets series. I've seen that a couple times. And Ayton is a top 3 center. I heard that from a YouTube video. So all these 3 things are taken into consideration, right? All 3 of these things. Why are people calling the Suns bad after? I sorry about that. We're back. But yeah, where was that? I was talking about the Suns. So people are calling the Suns bad after this Game 3 loss. When I know Booker only had like 10 points. I'm gonna get more into that like when the Game 3 when Game 3 comes up in this rundown that I'm doing. But it's just sad to see that one bad game, and then for one, I'll put it like this. Like me personally, I've already seen this from a realistic standpoint when it came down to this series as a whole. The first 2 games were in Phoenix. I expected Phoenix to win those first 2 games because obviously they played really good at home and they had a little bit of a longer break, I think, than the Bucks did, even though I don't know if the Suns series ended in 5 or they ended it in 6. I might have to check this now from when they beat the Clippers. Okay, they won the Clippers series in 6. Okay, in 6. So they kind of had like a similar like amount of time to lay off between games and stuff like that. So it wasn't even like a freshness factor. Probably more or less for Giannis. I mean, because he had the knee injury prior to this game even happening. But it's crazy to think that. I lost my track already. Yeah, it's like when it comes down to like the home teams, right? I expected the Suns to win those first 2 games. You go to Milwaukee, right? Milwaukee pretty much is known for being good at home and stuff like that. So that's pretty much where it kind of stems from when it comes to just teams like these. The Suns, obviously, good home teams. I would say solid road teams, but they can get the job done. Like they'll probably take a couple of losses on the road, like 1 or 2 losses on the road. But then like there's gonna be like that one game if it does go to 7 that they probably would sneak out. I feel like they have the potential to do that, but more or less the Bucks at home were going to like kind of have more of their like environment, more of their atmosphere, more of their energy in the game. And even then, like the team didn't really play that good in Game 3, more or less over than like Giannis dropping 40 plus again. But I'll get that, and I'll get to that when I get to it. So, also another thing I want to say before we even do anything else, Giannis, I wouldn't say his integrity, but like I've heard things about his conditioning. I've heard things about like was he ready? And I honestly, Giannis is basically in these last two games, he's proven that he can handle like the quote unquote pressure that the NBA or that NBA Twitter is putting on Giannis to be good. Obviously, no one's asking him to shoot threes, but more or less people are asking him to like play up to his potential or play up to his strengths, which is more or less his like. Of course, everybody wants you want to play up to your strengths and not like your borderline weaknesses of your pull-up mid-ranges and your fadeaways and your three-pointers, which you are working on all three of those things, but it's not as good as your 70 to 80% field goal percentage when you just run straight to the basket and try to put the ball up. So with Giannis getting his double-doubles or just having 40 plus on mostly twos, twos and free throws, I believe. It might have been twos and free throws. But it puts things in perspective to where it's like, hey, these guys know what they're good at, but obviously, sometimes they want to like expand and do other things with their game, which is completely understandable. But if you want to win a championship, sometimes you have to just do what you're good at, like not even what you're good at, but what you're exceptional at. And I feel like he's kind of now starting to realize that from game 2 on, because I feel like from game 2, that's when from game 2 he kind of like latched onto it, and then game 3 he kind of just like once again he duplicated the same thing. But let's talk about game 1. So Jrue Holiday struggled in game 1, just not really. Everybody kind of noticed that Jrue Holiday, just shooting wise, was not all the way there. Really, not the best possible. Not the best start you would want. Middleton and Giannis, of course, not to the extent of like Giannis in games 2 and 3, but Giannis actually, had a pretty solid start to this series. I'm trying to like figure out where the heck these like box scores are in the middle of this. So yeah, Chris Middleton started off with 29, had 4 assists and 7 total rebounds, and he had Giannis with 20 points, a block, 2 steals, 4 assists, and 17 total rebounds. Now the first game obviously was tame compared to what I explained earlier in this part so far, but that's a good way to start it. And then they still ended up losing, but that's mainly just because other people on the team really didn't have a good outing, especially Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez was exploited. I feel more or less in the first game of this series to a certain extent, because Brook Lopez is really like, people were saying that Brook Lopez was a good matchup for like the Suns, stuff like that. I didn't see the good matchup, mainly just because Brook is one of those like sneaky movers where he moves when like stuff gets like heated, or like in the heat of the moment, like Brook Lopez will fly around the court, like he'll get blocks and he'll move and everything. He's still very good, but when he's beat on plays, like you can clearly see like he's beat. I mean, he had 17 points in this game, obviously. Let me see how many threes. He had 3 threes. Yeah. So I mean, compared to Aiden, obviously it was somewhat even, but as far as like just like a well-rounded team outing, like Brook Lopez is kind of getting like the mismatch of having Brook Lopez on people is very, very like prevalent, or it's very apparent. And it was in the first game more or less that like everybody kind of like did good for the Suns. Like, Booker had 27, 22 from Ayton, 32 from Chris Paul. Chris Paul had a great game 1. That game was crazy. Michael Bridges had 14. Both of the Cams had 10 off the bench. Like all around, it was like just a really good game for the Suns to start the series off. And it was just based off how they were playing throughout this whole entire process. Like Ayton in the paint did his thing. Didn't really have that many blocks. Steal count. I think the steal count actually did the steal count go to the Bucks? That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Okay, no, the steal count went to the Suns. But yeah, it's just like it's an overall great game for the Suns. And the Suns always come out hot in these series. Like they've been doing that for a minute with almost every game during their playoff run. They've been doing a pretty good job at that. So I'd assume so going into the first game of this series. So then you have game 2, where sorry, I'm looking at something like this. Game 2, Middleton doesn't show up at all. Giannis drops 42, which was like the sound strategy, the sound turn up from 2 to 3, the leading up to the turn up from 2 to 3. And then for the Suns, Bridges had 27, which was one of the things that like I kind of liked about the matchup outside of Brook Lopez is that Middleton and Bridges are probably two of the more even guards, I'd say, matchup wise. But mainly is because like Middleton actually, has a challenge defensively. Like Middleton isn't just being guarded by like a Kevin Herter, like a guy who's good on defense, but really hasn't like been able to prove it against like a guy of his caliber. But Michael Bridges is actually kind of like one of those guys where he can score and he can also play that defense that you would like to see from a guy who's guarding the second best player on the opposing team. Like 11 points and 11 points, 8 assists, 2 steals. Middleton all around did well, but scoring wise, he just was not that guy. 42 and 12 from Giannis with 3 blocks and a steal with 4 assists. This is when, the turning point kind of came around, whereas like you can tell this was like Giannis was really locked in from this point on, which is ideally what you would want to see, because no one was really close to Giannis in points for this game, like by a wide margin. Drew Holiday had 17. Drew Holiday bounced back from the first game, 2 blocks and 2 steals. So really, and then Pat Connaughton had a very good flurry off the bench. Like Pat Connaughton actually was pretty good for. I think he was good in games 2 and 3, from what I can remember, but it kind of started in game 2 as well. So defensively, they play with more urgency, I'd say, when it came down to game 2. Like way more defensive, way more urgency defensively. I could not get the words out, but. And then even when you look at like the Suns, like they won the game, but it was like a diminished number, but it was more well-rounded like scoring profile. Like Booker had 31, Ayton had 10 and 11 with 3 steals and 2 blocks. Chris Paul had 23 and 8 actually, almost had a double-double. 27 from Bridges, like I said earlier, 11 from Crowder. And that's pretty much kind of where it stops, because, I mean, Cam Johnson had 8 off the bench. Payne didn't really do too much this game either. But it was just more or less like the Bucks played way better defensively, but it was just certain things offensively that they just couldn't, like, really get a hold on. If Middleton has a good game, maybe this game turns out differently. Or even, like, say, like a Bobby Portis, because Bobby Portis only had 2 points. I don't know how long he played. I think he played, like, 4 minutes in this game. Or 4 minutes per game, 4 or something like that. So he's not really playing that much either to really make an impact. But game 2, you can tell that's where it kind of like creeped up too, because when you look at the scoring differential between 105 and 108, it's really not that big of a difference. But the point total, as far as like how many points went into that, is like it's a small margin, but you can see where the gap kind of starts to like form as far as the Bucks are starting to get it. Then you can go into game 3, where they get the 20-point blowout and people lose their minds. Like the first 2 games weren't really like major blowouts, but they were decided by a sizable margin. And it was for the Suns. Like the Bucks weren't really down in games. It was just like everybody knew that like the Bucks were trying to get their heads wrapped around things. So then you have games like, Chris Paul had 19, Crowder had 18, Booker had 10, Bridges had 4, and Ayton had 18. So very much low numbers. Cam Johnson had 14 off the bench. Like very much low numbers. Defensively, they were really not that good. Only 3 steals overall and 2 blocks. No, 3 blocks as a team, I believe. 3 blocks as a team. And a bunch of turnovers from not Booker, but from like Bridges and Chris Paul. So this is when like you kind of realize like things start to take shape in a way. And then, you got Middleton. Middleton's still not playing as good as he could potentially with 18 points. That's better than last game by a small margin. Drew Holiday had 21 with 9 assists, 21 and 9. Drew Holiday, more or less, same way with the Hawks series. Him and Middleton are the deciding factor, but if all 3 of them are playing and Middleton's just not there, like Drew Holiday is going to have to be that next guy up to like really, apply pressure with Giannis, because they're not going to win more than this game unless they have at least 2 of their semi-big 3 applying pressure on the offensive end. Giannis, of course, 41 and 13. And then what was it like? Well, Bobby Portis eventually played. Like, how many minutes he played? He played 18 minutes in this game, and Bobby Portis had 11. Connaughton kind of dropped from game 2. He had 8 points, but more or less, this game was speared by 3 people, and it was the 3 people for the Bucks that people expected to lead the charge, which would be Giannis, Drew Holiday, and Middleton. It starts with them and it ends with them. just off the simple fact of if Giannis is dropping 41, right? Giannis is pretty much kind of got it clicking for these past 2 games. You don't just randomly drop 40 plus in 2 straight games without somewhat having it figured out. And that's one thing that we can honestly say, like, when it came down to like the big time pressure plays that people were saying like Giannis couldn't handle with free throws and people counting out the seconds when he shoots, or people kind of forcing him to take these bad jumpers instead of letting him get to the paint, or even just fouling him, not like on some Ben Simmons stuff, because Giannis can actually hit his free throws. They just take a really long time to see the jumper go up. But now, also, speaking of jumpers, so random side note, I was talking to somebody else about this a while ago. Giannis's jumper looked so much better from his rookie year compared to now. And I'm pretty sure you guys mostly have seen that if you do have Twitter and stuff. Like, there was a YouTube video that was clipped just showing like how Giannis used to shoot from his earlier stages to now, where it's like he had fluidity when he first got to the league, and then right now he kind of just shoots like not Draymond, but you can just tell like he tries to like minimalize the power of the shot. Like it's weird, but back on track. But once again, like I said earlier, the Bucks, I expect them to win the home game, mainly just because obviously they played good at home, and then 2, Giannis had it figured out. Giannis kind of mapped out what he needed to do, and then even if you look at like how he shot in this game, he only took 2 threes, he missed both of them, 76% from the free throw line and 60% from the field. That's at least like somewhat tied for the best percentage on his team. Third, well, 3-way tie, because a lot of people shot 60%. But you realize these things when it comes down to how they operate the game, and just to amplify like what Giannis is good at. And then you got Drew Holiday he's shooting 50% from 3, 5 of 10. That's what you would like. That's what you want to see out of your point guard as well. It's just like it has to be a well-rounded game for the Bucks to actually like have a chance. And then plus nights like this where where the Suns struggle shooting wise, it's gonna happen. Like there's gonna be nights where Booker's 1 for 7. There's gonna be nights where Bridges can't hit. There's gonna be nights where Cam Johnson is 1 for 5. But it's not gonna be constant. So if they have another night, like they have another bad night, or say they have a good night, like another night, like say game 2, where everybody that is like core pieces of the Suns team has a good game. If Giannis if Giannis is the only one that shows up for another game like that, which I think this next game is still in Milwaukee, so it could, but the series has the potential to go 2-2, in my opinion, potentially to go 2-2. But with it being 2 home games in a row, and then it kind of just goes back and forth depending on who wins the game. But if it's situations like that, I really don't see the Bucks holding on for anything more than 6 games, which obviously probably this is like what it'll go to at this point. Because I mean, the Suns could win in 5. The Suns could definitely win in 5 potentially. I think it'd even be in 5. Yeah, it'd be in 5. So, but that's just all it is really when it comes down to it. Because players like Cam Johnson aren't really gonna struggle from deep that much, even though he still did have 14 points. Like most of them guys don't really struggle from 3 that much. They're gonna at least make 5 or 6 of their shots at most. So banking on them to have off shooting nights all the time is gonna be like shooting yourself in the foot almost. But it's really just about with both teams consistency, which is how it is with every other team. Like, which is why the Hawks didn't make it out of the Bucks series, because consistency was a problem for, I guess you could say, like Herter and at some points Trae Young, but he was playing with an injured ankle. So I mean, consistency with him is like it's like yin and yang, because it's like you already know why he's negative, but it's just Trae Young. Like people expect him to shoot better. Well, people expect him to shoot at a high rate, even on a bum ankle. But that's really what it comes down to for both teams. Or just like, and then defensively, I feel defensively this is actually I don't know if of course like defensive plays aren't really going to show on a stat sheet, but I feel like defensively like they're pretty even. Like as far as like the people they can throw at each other. Giannis probably the only one that actually looks like it's probably like a vast mismatch right now, because I don't know if Jay Crowder is guarding him or who they have on him. But if he has 40 plus in 2 straight games, something has to change defensively. Like you're gonna have to put Ayton on him or something. Play Kaminsky or Saric at the. I don't know if Saric actually can play. Actually, I don't think I see Saric on the reserves list, but you're gonna have to throw somebody else in there that at least is kind of long enough to bother him. Probably not to slow him down, but like enough to bother his shots to make it look like to make it a little bit harder for him. Because right now he's coming down just he's probably coming out just banging or coming out getting to those spots and getting to where he can be. But this series, obviously, for most people that probably aren't even watching the series at all, I'm trying to keep up with it more or less, but just based off of watching all the other games leading up to this point, even if I don't catch every single game in this series, these playoffs have been very much exceptional from a standpoint of competition and new faces making like their first playoff pushes, and that's realistically all people really should be looking at. I mean, of course, like who wins and stuff, but when you look at it, we have Devin Booker and Ayton in the finals in their first playoff appearance. We have Giannis finally getting past that hurdle and making it to the finals. You have Drew Holiday, who was, he was bad he was on the Sixers, had a lot of potential, injuries nagged him early. He was in the Pelicans for a little bit, kind of rebuilding himself, gets traded to Milwaukee, and he's a key piece on their championship run. There's a lot of things that can be highlighted, or even what's that, Cam Johnson, I'd say. I'm trying to think of something like I could think about with Cam Johnson, because I mean, I don't know if he was highly touted when he was drafted, but Cam Johnson actually is like, him and Michael Bridges are like those quintessential three. I wouldn't say three and D is for Bridges, but I mean, Johnson ain't that bad on defense. Plus, he had that nasty dunk on PJ Tucker. Like, I saw that highlight. He low-key soared. I didn't know he had that in him. But those guys, like, getting their first taste of finals experience, those are guys that for sure are like, soaking this up and for sure are going to be very much contending, whether they win, like contending again next year, whether either team like win or loss for either team, they're coming back next year. People can always say, oh, like, LeBron's healthy, if the Nuggets have Murray, if the Nets big three was together. There's a lot of holes that you can poke into it, but realistically, they're going to still compete because at some point this year they've seen all of those people, and games were either close with a victory or close in a loss. I think some of them got blown out. I don't know which one. I don't know, but just people should enjoy this finals, and I know people are probably not enjoying it because they're not seeing their favorite players, but overall, even in the first three games, like with the fact that they both scored over 100, I don't see it as bad defense. I see it as good teams, and if a 20-point win blows up Twitter or blows up ESPN to where they're like, oh, the Suns just choked, Devin Booker is not washed, but Devin Booker is like not living up to the pace he set in game 2 and 1. Ayton was crazy in game 1 and he's dropping, and like all these weird things. Like the games are going to be fine. The teams are going to be fine. They have rough patches in the games. Like there's going to be times where one side might be clicking that night. And in this case, Giannis has been clicking for 2 straight games. And you have times where, Ayton got to his spots a lot better in game 1. Game 2 and 3, there was some adjustments being made to make sure that Ayton wasn't as ample in the offense for the Suns. Now everybody else is probably just like, just getting probably good opportunities for shots, and it's just not falling. It's just not their night. But that's really all the Bucks have to worry about. All the Bucks have to worry about off, like when it comes to the Suns, more or less at the core of it is if you can slow Booker down, if you can keep Ayton from putbacks, and if Chris Paul is just having a bad night. Those are things you have to try to bank on if you're the Bucks. Like for the Suns, when you look at Milwaukee, I mean, at this point, it's looking like it's really just like you take Giannis out the equation, not literally like injury wise, but I mean, like you if you eliminate Giannis from the game, it makes somebody else have to play or make other people have to beat you. That might be what you kind of want. But then you have the chance of like Middleton going crazy for 30 plus, or you have like it's harder for the Suns to try to pick a point of interest than it is for the Bucks to pick a point of interest because other guys are going to score, but more or less if Booker and Ayton and Paul all have a good game, Bridges gets more open because they're worried about Booker, or Cam Johnson can come off the bench and just sneak in a good 15. Like there's other things that like it starts with them and it kind of ends with them. Where Milwaukee, they have 3 people that can take over a game, but if only one guy taking over the game, you kind of have to try to like force that guy to make other people seem as important as he is right now. which, is going to be the deciding factor for whichever team wins the finals. I'm still going to go with the Suns, honestly, because the Suns, I've not even just for Chris Paul, like just overall, I really like the Suns team a lot by how it's constructed and like the fact that this is like literally like their first like full like finals like appearance, and these guys are kind of like not getting like they're not getting folded really, like a 20-point loss compared to them having 118 in the first game. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal or that drastic of a drop off. So there's still a chance for obviously other teams to have like flows of momentum, because like I said, like I feel like this might be 2-2 by the time after tomorrow's game. I feel like it's gonna be a 2-2 series potentially, especially if Giannis is still like locked in and focused and the Suns don't adjust or like throw bodies at him to try to diminish that 40 that well, I think it's like 40, that 30 and above like point scoring scenario. That's going to be really the deciding factor for like if this series gets really, really interesting or if this series gets really, really lopsided. Because if it gets 3-1, then more often than not, you would feel like the Suns are going to be able to apply like as much pressure as possible, because they go back to Phoenix after game 4, I believe. So they can apply like the highest amount of pressure if they go into Milwaukee and win game 4, take it back to Phoenix, and then you can potentially close them out. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Like I said earlier, I do have a YouTube channel, VFTM. Well, I don't know if you can search it up and find it. You probably can. But you search it up and find it, or there's a link on my Anchor profile somewhere regarding like my YouTube channel, probably somewhere on there. Also, if you want to support the podcast even more so that, we can get cameras and stuff and just make a lot of stuff happen, make it a job, honestly. That's like, no, let me get it. I'm just kidding. But like, if you want to support the podcast, you know where to go. The links is in the description for the podcast as well. Listen to it on all your streaming podcast platforms like Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breakers, probably on Breaker. I don't remember. But then yeah, like I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow the Twitters also, because I need to get more active on that, but probably not on the VFTM one, probably on my main one, like tweeting games. I'm just like trying to do a lot of things right now. But hope you guys have a good rest of your week, actually, because I don't know if I'm doing anything else. Also mock draft potentially coming out. Not sure if it's this week or next week, but at some point, probably this week, because the draft is very, very close. So mock draft coming out as well. And I will see you guys on the next episode. Peace.